Well, it is so good to be here, as St. Peter says, and what an honor to be a speaker at a men's conference. I've spoken to men's groups in the Archdiocese of Detroit before, but this is actually groundbreaking, I think, for men's conferences around the country. You guys are setting precedent, I hope, and give yourselves a round of applause for saying yes. It's really, I think, very important for us to understand each other better. And that's one of the reasons that I thought it would be good for me to be here, picking up on what Deacon Jim was talking about, this whole idea of the women in your lives, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you're religious, whatever the case may be, we have to be together in society, in the home, in the workplace, and understand each other better. And we've really made a mess of things. And I think we both take equal responsibility, both men and women. And we're going to get into that in this talk this morning. But before I go on, I do want to recognize my husband, as John said. And for those of you who have wives who maybe are not there with you yet on the journey, maybe you're struggling in your marriage, maybe there are issues, maybe if you're single, you're looking for a godly woman, stay strong, be a leader, be prayerful. Because if it wasn't for my husband praying for me when I was going in the opposite direction and running far away from God, there is no way I would be doing what I'm doing today, as John said, and there is no way that I would be on Catholic radio, or that we would even still be married. I'm going to share with you my testimony, little bits and pieces of really our testimony as I go through my two talks today. But the prayers of a faithful husband avail us so much. And I'd like my husband, Deacon Dominic, to stand. There he is over there. You'll see him at Mass today. I'd also like to thank Holy Family Radio. Hopefully all of you are listeners. I hope at least you're familiar with the radio station. I'm going to do a shameless plug for donations for Catholic Radio. This is Lent, right? Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. They have a little basket back there. Whatever you can do to support Catholic Radio, they're working very hard to spread the good news of Jesus Christ and His Church across Western Michigan. So if you can spare a few $100 bills, a few $50 bills, just drop them in the little basket there. But give them a round of applause. They do a great job, Holy Family Radio, carrying my show every morning. And also to the bishop and to the committee for putting this conference together. A sellout today. Close to 800 guys showing up today. Praise God. Thank you so much. It's interesting when they were rolling the video. I love the way the Holy Spirit always works. They had this quote up from St. Catherine of Siena, of course, one of the female doctors of the church. And I love this quote: when we are whom we are called to be, we will set the world ablaze. But the problem is, and this is what I'm going to talk about in this first presentation, is that we don't know whom we're called to be because we don't even know who we are anymore in terms of men and women. We're all over the map. Facebook now tells us there's actually 50 ways we can identify ourselves gender-wise. Who knew? I thought I was a pretty hip chick. I mean, I've heard of androgynous before, but who knew about interfluid, transgender, trans male, trans female? 50 ways to identify yourself sexually. And we wonder why we're so confused. We need to get back to the basics so we can find out who we were meant to be, so we indeed can go ahead and set the world ablaze. And God has given each one of us some very unique gifts and talents, and I'll be talking about that more this afternoon in my second presentation, God's Bucket List. But this verse, I think, is so significant for us. So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. This is the way it's supposed to be. And why not have a woman at a men's conference when the church in her nature is what? Holy Mother Church, she is the bride, Jesus is the bridegroom, and the church is the bride. So we're supposed to understand this male-female complementarity, but it's gotten all mixed up. Why? Because of what happened in the garden. Eve took the fruit, ate it. Adam didn't stop her, so again, I think we're both equally to blame here, male and female. And ever since then, it's been spinning out of control. to the information that we have out there about, again, all these different gender types. You can do anything that you want with your body. You can redefine marriage as long as you do whatever you want to do. And we're one confused bunch. And women especially are very confused. And so that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. And I want to put it on your hearts and some of the frustrations that you may have about dealing, whether it's with your wives or with women in the workplace or even women in a professional setting or even going on a business trip. I see it all the time. And because of my journey back to the church, I can sense the tension in some men, and I travel, I'm on planes a lot, and I can tell when gentlemen are trying to be gentlemen and help me out with a bag, and when I've packed, once again, one too many pair of shoes and can't get the, my suitcase into the overhead in the airplane, and a gentleman will say, "May I help you? Is it okay if I help you lift your bag into the overhead?" Please. And yet imagine a society where we are to the point now where men and women can't even be courteous to each other for fear of being accused of being sexist or a male chauvinist. We've lost a sense of who we are, so of course we don't know who we're supposed to be in order to set the world aflame, because we don't even know who we are anymore. We are created in His image and likeness. Male and female, equal, but very, very different. Let's take a look at Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2335. Just want to kind of give us some grounding here so we can go forward. Each of the two sexes is an image of the power and tenderness of God, with equal dignity, though in a different way. The union of a man and a woman in marriage is a way of imitating in the flesh the Creator's generosity. Therefore, a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. All human generations proceed from this union. Physical, moral, and spiritual differences and complementarity are oriented toward the goods of marriage and the flourishing of family life. The harmony of the couple and of society depends in part on the way in which the complementarity, needs, and mutual support, that give and take between the sexes are lived out. Unfortunately, we've lost that, I think, completely. Now, we can get it back, and I think the Catholic Church is making great strides in this because we have the fullness of the truth, and so many women like myself who've been out there in the world as, former feminazis, as I call myself, and have come back by the grace of God, and to really embrace the teachings of the Church and to understand that, like Dorothy said, there's no place like home. This is the best that we can be as men and women in relationship with Christ in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Now, since we've had some jokes already this morning, I thought I'd have one too. And, if you've heard it before, okay, as John said, but laugh a little bit, make me feel a little good, because this is on live radio. I don't want to make a total fool of myself, okay? All right. Understanding women. A man was walking along a beach in deep thought and prayer. God said to him, "My son, I can see you're struggling, so I want to answer a special prayer for you." The man sat and thought and said, "Well, Lord, I've always wanted to see your beautiful creation in the islands of Hawaii, but I'm scared to fly, and I get very seasick. Could you build me a bridge so that I can drive over there to visit?" God smiled and said, "Oh, my son, think of the logistics. I realize I'm God and all, but really, you're asking an awful lot. How would the supports ever reach the bottom of the ocean? Think of how much concrete, how much steel. No, I think you're going to have to think of another prayer or desire of your heart." So the man says, "Okay, Lord, well, I've been married and divorced 4 times. My wives always said that I never cared about them, that I was insensitive. So I pray I could just understand women, know how they feel inside, and what they're thinking when they give me the silent treatment. Know why they're crying. Know what they really want and what they really mean when they say, 'Nothing.' And know how to make them truly happy please answer this prayer. The Lord paused for a moment, sighed deeply, and said, "My son, do you want that bridge 2 lanes or 4?" All right, so here's what we're going to look at today in the Women of Our Lives in this presentation. I want to start out with a beautiful letter I received several years ago that was so powerful I put it in my book, Extreme Makeover. It was from a young girl, a junior at a Catholic high school in Lincoln, Nebraska, a very good, solid Catholic high school with Mass weekly and a theology department that's teaching theology of the body and Eucharistic adoration. And I mean, really, really good school. One of those really real Catholic schools, not Catholic in name only. And yet, from her letter, I could see that the world, the culture was still seeping in and having a great impact on her life and, according to her letter, the lives of the other teens at her school. She shared with me some of her struggles, and it's very powerful because that could be your sister, it could be your daughter, your niece, your granddaughter. And I'm here to tell you that we are all under attack, but specifically, Satan really hates women. Why? Because he's scared of us. Because how did the Savior of the world come into this world? Through a woman. What do we represent? Salvation, right? Through a woman. Jesus born of a woman. And they're after the women in your lives. The culture, primarily though, we know who. Now, if you are new to this and you're first coming back to the church and you think I sound like some crazy zealot, just asking you to keep an open mind and an open heart this morning, and to listen to the voice of this young girl when I share this letter with you, and to listen to some of the research and the statistics and the secular support that backs up what God gives us in the church teaching about this male-female relationship and why women, especially physically and emotionally and spiritually, are so much under attack through abortion, contraception, sexual objectification, and on and on. So this is why I want to start with this very powerful letter from this teen, and it's in my book, Extreme Makeover. Then I'm going to give you the cultural connection, understanding the power of the media in our lives, in the lives of women, and in your lives as well. This afternoon, I'm going to hit real hard on a very important topic of pornography. And it's not just a problem among men, it's a problem among women now too, although a little bit differently because women are more relationship-wise, you know, they are in relations, and so they want to be very warm and fuzzy, and so it starts out that way, maybe with a fantasy story, and it gets worse. That's why 50 Shades of Grey is so popular, Lord help us, because it's a relational story. But pornography is a huge, huge, huge burden in our society right now. We need to address it, and I'll talk about that this afternoon. Then we're going to look at the feminist mistake. It's actually a chapter in my book, Extreme Makeover. And we're going to look at how the church recognized when the whole feminism movement, I'm not talking about back in the 20s with the suffragettes, where it really started, but I'm talking about in the 60s and 70s. The church recognizes, and this is what a lot of people, especially women, don't understand, the church recognized that things need to change from it in terms of equality in the workplace, better conditions, things like that. And that John Paul II, who gave us great teachings on women, Papal Letter to Women, Mulieris Dignitatem, and others, recognized that things needed to change. But what happened was that the feminists took it way too far, and aided and abetted greatly in this situation being out of control. So we're going to take a look at that. Also some information on male bashing, which I think is terrible. And we see this from the culture all the time. Fathers, husbands, men in general are made to feel like they're nothing more than sperm banks. They're not needed in the home. Even shows that are somewhat tame when they were popular and that were cute and, you know, somewhat funny. For example, like Everybody Loves Raymond. But if you think about every male character, even on that show, they're all painted and portrayed as buffoons who can't find their way out of a paper bag without a woman helping them along. And that hasn't been the case with the men in my life. I have a great husband. I had an amazing father, passed away almost 4 years ago, and he was the one in my early years, in addition to my mom. My father was very significant in encouraging me to pursue my dream of going into broadcast journalism. And then we'll have an apology. John Paul II apologized to women when he wrote the Papal Letter to Women. for the wrongs that the church had done to women, but also the wrongs that society had done to women. But I apologize when I give this talk. This is the second time I've given it. A heartfelt apology from me, because I was a big part of the problem, and on behalf of other women who have come back to the church. Then we'll look at some surprising witnesses, women who have no religious dog in this fight, guys, and yet through their own work, their own life experience, are saying something's wrong here. And it's very, very surprising sources from some pop stars and even from some radical feminists who are now starting to wake up and smell the cappuccino, as I say. Then we'll have an action plan for building a legacy together. And then final words for daughters and sons of the King. 3 things I want you to take from this talk today. Nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes 1:9. Going back to that verse in Genesis, male, female, he created them. This has been going on since original sin came into the world. We hear about it more, we see it more. It even affects us more because of the culture and the times we're living in, this information age where we're just media saturated all the time. But it goes back again to the basics. It's because we don't surrender. The theme for today is surrender. We don't surrender because we think God doesn't have the right plan for us. Yeah, I love him, and yeah, I want to be in a personal relationship, but then I want to be a cafeteria Christian or a cafeteria Catholic, and I want to go down the line and pick and choose what I like. That's what I did for years. Surrender. That's what I had to do. That's what my husband and I had to do in our marriage. That's what I had to do with my career. Was I willing to walk away from everything I knew as an award-winning, very successful broadcast journalist in a major market when God was calling me to leave? And it wasn't easy. It took me a good 3 years to make that decision, to walk away from everything that I had been comfortable with, including a very nice salary and lots of exposure on major market media, and say yes to him. And I wish I could say I was like, here I am, Lord, I've come to do your will. I'm 100% Italian. I know you probably heard this if you listen to me on radio. I'll probably mention it a few times today. Very proud of my heritage. But I'm half Calabrese, which is southern Italy. We're known for our testa dura, hard heads. And then I'm half Napolitan, which is a whole nother bag of wax. So Naples and Calabria mixed. So I'm a pretty tough cookie, if you get my drift, all right? So nothing new under the sun. Your leadership is desperately needed. You are needed. I don't care what the world tells you. I don't care what anybody else tells you. Your leadership is needed. If it wasn't for my husband's leadership, again, I can't say that enough, I wouldn't be here today. And you build a legacy by, building a firm foundation and surrendering and sacrificing. That's how you start, giving your life over to God. Laying down your life. Why is it okay for Jesus to do that for us, but not us to do that for him? All right, so there's nothing new under the sun. Your leadership is desperately needed, and you build a legacy by laying a firm foundation of surrender and sacrifice. Let me take just a minute and read this letter from a teen, which is in my book, Extreme Makeover. I was so moved by this that I decided I simply had to put it in the book to make the point of how our young people, especially young women, are being affected. And remember, listen to this. This is from a girl who she's in college by now, I think, but she had a good education. She had a good family life, too. And she was in a good, solid Catholic high school. Now, she wrote me this after I spoke at the school, and I do a talk for teens called Choices and Challenges Facing Today's Teens, and I talk about my own battle with the culture and what the culture did to me when I was growing up. And I'm very honest in this book and my presentation to teens about my battle with an eating disorder as a child. She said, hello, I've been in this high school for 3.5 years, and this is the first time I remember someone coming in to talk about self-image. I really want to thank you for the talk you gave. It really touched me deeply. The first friend I made in high school was bulimic. And I came close to it too. I then began cutting myself and continued with that for several months. My parents got help for me, and at the end of my junior year, I finally came out of depression. I was able to return to God, and I've never felt happier. I'll never allow myself to lose him again or fall back into that depressing state of mind. Hearing your talk today really helped solidify this in my heart. I'm so grateful for your talk and your testimony. A close friend of mine is now suffering from anorexia. I was the only person she confided in, and I finally had enough sense to tell the school guidance counselor about it. Now all I can do is pray she's getting the help she needs. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to our school. A lot of people need to hear what you had to say. Even though my 3-year depression has ended, I felt I got a lot from your story. Signed, Mary. So when she sent this letter a few years ago, she was probably, what, if she's a junior in high school, what, probably 16 years old? And the majority of her high school years were spent struggling with cutting herself, experimenting with an eating disorder, seeing friends at the same school going through the same thing. And this is in a good, solid Catholic high school. And her parents were involved in her life. So imagine what it's like if you are not taking a leadership role in your home and being a dad. Your kids don't need friends, guys. They need a dad. When I was going through my eating disorder, I had tons of friends. And my friends thought I looked great. They thought it was great that I was super skinny. I needed my mom and my dad, and they were there for me to help me overcome that awful eating disease. The cultural connection, really important for you to understand media saturation and the conditioning that has gone on now, especially in the last 40, 50 years when it's gotten extremely overwhelming, 24/7. Now, the beauty about the church is the church doesn't tell us to throw out the baby with the bathwater. The church is embracing the media, especially the new media. Many of the reasons that Pope Francis is so popular is because these images have been put out there, not just by the secular press, but by the Vatican, which has really come in its own in terms of their own social media efforts. You know, the Pope tweets every day. They have a great Facebook page. They have a great website. They put out the videos all the time. So it's not that all the media are bad. And there are even some things, although it's becoming fewer and fewer, in the secular media that can be educational and helpful. But when I talk about the media here today, I'm talking about the overall media climate. I'm talking about the movies, I'm talking about programming, I'm talking about music. And it's attacking our families, and it's attacking women, and it's attacking who we are, made in his image and likeness, every single moment of the day. Now, it's really interesting in terms of what's happening, especially with women, despite all the advances that we've made. And all the things that needed to be addressed, women still do not feel good about themselves. I speak at women's conferences all over the country. I was in Rochester, New York, sellout crowd, 1,200 women. So many women are dealing with self-esteem issues. They're confused. So many women are post-abortive and are still suffering, even though they've gone to confession, they haven't gone through healing, because they just don't really feel like they've been forgiven. They don't feel good enough. And the world is still telling them that it's like getting your tooth pulled. They've got all these conflicting feelings. They're told that they should be able to be like a man and jump from bed to bed without responsibility. And then when they do that, because the way we're designed, it affects them physically, spiritually, and emotionally, and biologically. We're not meant to sleep around. So there's all this confusion out there. And you know who's most under attack in terms of so-called sexual freedom? Not just psychologically, but physically, it's women. Again, everything old is new again, right? Nothing new under the sun. Same thing. Sexually transmitted diseases are dangerously high in the United States to epidemic proportions, about 20 million new STD cases every year. HIV aside, girls and women carry 80% of the burden of the negative consequences for multiple partners and early sexual behavior. Dr. Miriam Grossman, who's not coming at this from a religious perspective, she's an expert, she's a psychiatrist, she's written several books, she worked on college campuses for many years as a campus psychiatrist. She wrote the book Unprotected, talking about what young girls were exposing themselves to on a regular basis. This is what's happening, guys, with the women in your lives. Okay? She found in her research with work with girls on college campuses Many of the psychological problems associated with sexual promiscuity have to do with the way women are designed, going back to the basics, okay? Intimate behavior in women when they have an intimate relationship causes a release of a brain chemical that promotes feelings of attachment and trust even with a stranger. So the world, you turn on the TV and the world is saying that women, again, you see it in the commercials, you see it in the programs, you see it in the movies, you see it in the videos. Sex, 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 with whomever, whenever, as much as you want. No commitment, it's great. You've got birth control, you've got abortion, you've got all these things. It's not a big deal. And yet it's destroying women emotionally and physically and spiritually. Studies show that girls who are sexually active are much more likely to suffer from depression than those who remain chaste. And then when it comes to the whole issue of abortion, with still up to 1 million abortions in this country every year, the majority of women who've had abortions claim they were pressured into doing so, so choice has got nothing to do with it. Usually there isn't a choice. And my husband can tell you this because he's a sidewalk counselor in Detroit. And most of the time the women are even going by themselves or the men are dropping them off. And the women are coming out of the clinics not skipping and jumping for joy, but usually looking very sad and broken, and 9 times out of 10 in tears. The world doesn't tell women before they enter into that facility that abortion is associated with a long list of medical and mental and physical problems, including increased risk of breast cancer, depression, substance abuse. Oral contraceptives, just this week, the pill, 2 studies, increased risk of multiple sclerosis and glaucoma for women who use oral contraceptives. The World Health Organization 8 years ago declared the pill a group 1 carcinogen. And I don't know how many of you heard about this beautiful elderly woman in Italy, in my motherland of Italy. Her name was Oriella Casanello. I talked about this story on my show. A healthy Italian woman paid a Swiss right to die clinic 10,000 euro to end her life. Why? Because she was afraid of losing her looks. Had herself euthanized. A few years ago, the American Psychological Association, which is probably one of the most left-leaning professional organizations known to man, came out with a report called The Sexualization of Girls. And it found that all media add to the problem of girls being over-sexualized. And when they feel like they're wanted only for their bodies, what happens? Increased emotional problems, problems in school, increased risk of eating disorders. This isn't rocket science. When we're not respected with our dignity, things start to go awry. And then about 8 years ago, there was a fascinating study done by, of all people, the Dove Soap Company on beauty. They've updated this a few times since then. When the study first came out, they went around the world, interviewed women in developed countries, in countries like the United States where they're educated and they're working and whatnot and hold down jobs. And they asked them, do you consider yourself beautiful? Only 2% of women said they consider themselves to be beautiful. More than 40% not even comfortable with describing themselves as beautiful. More than 50% agreed that more attractive women, the prettier you are, the more valued you are by a man. Every time we turn on the TV, we get a message about appearance. 1 out of every 3 women is on a diet at any given time. If you're married or you have a sister or you're around women, you know that we're always talking about diet, right? Diet, diet, diet. Now, for the dads out there, what do you think the average age is for a young girl to start dieting? Throw out some numbers. What do you think? 8. The average age for a young girl to start dieting is 8 years old. Last week, received a heartbreaking email from a grandmother, a listener of mine, begging me for resources and help because her granddaughter is dying from anorexia nervosa. They've had her in and out of the hospital, and nothing seems to be working. She's 10 years old. Parents Television Council study found that violence against women, and this is related to pornography. I don't have time to go into detail this particular report, but found that violence against women on TV has skyrocketed in the last few years. And most of the violence against women that we see on these crime shows is in regards to sex crimes. This is how the women in your lives are being portrayed, and this is how the women in your lives are being affected by the cultural connection. And in turn, because we're supposed to be working together and we have that male-female complementarity, the image of likeness of God, Jesus the bridegroom, the church the bride, supposed to be working hand in hand for the kingdom, it affects all of us. Even if you're single, even if you're religious, because we live in, much to Facebook's dismay, it's still just male and female out there, but we live in a male-female world, so we're all affected by the way women are affected. The Feminist Mistake, again, it's a chapter in Extreme Makeover where I take an in-depth look at radical feminism. And for me, when I was coming back to the church, this was freeing, thrilling, but also extremely maddening and frustrating. Where the heck was this? Why didn't I know about this? I was like, woo, wow, I could have had a V8. You know, I was on Channel 7, I was on Channel 50. If you guys were in Detroit, you probably saw me when I had really even bigger hair than this, big Rosanna Dana hair. Kept me very warm, though, in those live shots out in the snow, let me tell you. But, you know, and I thought I knew all that I needed to know about the church. I still considered myself Catholic, still got the ashes on Ash Wednesday, still went to Mass once in a while. But I was also very pro-choice, and I knew nothing, zip, zero, nada, about what was going on with abortion. I thought I did. I didn't. My husband's an engineer. He was always pro-life. He said, you know, this isn't rocket science. It's a baby, you know? But I was, oh, a woman's right to choose, my body, my choice. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And when I started to slowly peel away that onion, all those layers that I had built up over the years, that hardened heart, because it was always my will, okay, Lord, here's what I'm going to do. And you know what? I did everything I said I was going to do. I had this bucket list. It was my bucket list. It wasn't God's bucket list. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I hit pretty much all my goals before I was 30 years old. You know? It was all about me. And it took me getting knocked on my keister a few times before I surrendered completely. So I bought into the radical feminism. You heard John talk about the wonderful experience I've had now at speaking at Vatican conferences and also attending as a delegate. And one of the first Vatican conferences I attended as a delegate was back in 2008, when they had the anniversary of John Paul II's groundbreaking letter about women, Mulieris Dignitatem on the dignity and vocation of women. And one of my favorite, also former feminazis, now new feminist, is Helen Alvery. She's an attorney, she's quite prominent, she's a Vatican consultant, and she's in the media a lot. She's fabulous. She was one of the presenters. And she talked about the way women got it wrong, the way radical feminism got it wrong. I'm going to share just a few quotes from her because I think it's very enlightening. She said, Western feminism of the 20th century aided and abetted in their own objectification. Feminists insisting they are striking a blow for women's freedom by identifying freedom with undisciplined sexuality. On the one hand, one can see how strong was a temptation to break women out of the limited roles assigned to them in earlier times and to give them the upper hand over men. Marriage and motherhood were constantly portrayed as lesser vocations, suited to those with lesser intelligence. But this feminism's response was and remains fundamentally flawed. It is at odds with human nature. There we go, going back to the male-female in his image and likeness again. It drew upon the worst fears of male behavior for its prescriptions. Thus was the feminist woman, and this is a key line, listen to this, urged to be, and this is what we were fed growing up in the 70s as women. I graduated from college in 1981. 74, or in high school, graduated from high school 77, 73 to 77, right after Roe v. Wade, was this huge push with this garbage coming at us. Now, some of it was necessary, as I said, because of the job situation, education, and all that. I get it. And part of the reason I'm able to do what I'm doing because of some of the women who did make positive strides. But we were fed this hook, line, and sinker. You don't need marriage. You don't need a man. It's all about you, what you want. And if you have to sacrifice everything, including your own life-giving ability, then so be it. It drew upon the worst features of male behavior for its prescriptions. Thus was a feminist urged to be a sexually adventurous, marriage and children spurning, money and career-driven creature. That was me. Another way of putting this is to say that feminism urged women to imitate the male version of original sin, domination, to attain equality and happiness. Now, as Helen Alvery went on to explain in her address, and as John Paul II pointed out many, many times, there were so many problems in terms of the roles and treatment of women that needed to be addressed. Unfortunately, it's gone too far. Helen explains many laws were passed or enacted protecting women against rape, domestic violence, sexual harassment. But because of a deep misunderstanding about the nature of freedom and who we are in terms of male-female made in God's image and likeness, these same feminists, she says, went on to help enact laws about sex and marriage and family, which in many ways affirmed their own objectification and made a very bad situation even worse. I already talked a little bit about abortion on demand up until 9 months, with the fathers often being left out of the picture. I've interviewed many, many men at the March for Life every year, which I now cover for EWTN Live. They carry signs, "I regret lost fatherhood." No-fault divorce, imbalance in the legal system when it comes to parental right cases, access to contraception in schools without parental consent, legal recognition and a redefinition of marriage for anyone who wants to call themselves a family, laws pertaining to reproductive technologies such as egg harvesting, and more recently, the HHS mandate telling we women that our fertility is a disease and that we have to have all this access to help us deal with this disease of fertility. And then, of course, I mentioned briefly earlier male bashing, the stereotyping of men as brutal, stupid, or otherwise objectionable. You see it in shows, as I said, Everybody Loves Raymond, pretty, innocent in terms of showing a family, and it's cute and it's funny, and I get the Italian East Coast thing because I'm originally from the East Coast, and some of it was cute, but each man in that show was portrayed very negatively and couldn't, again, as I said earlier, find his way out of a paper bag without the help of a woman. King of Queens, American Dad, The Simpsons, and on and on and on. How many commercials do we see where the guy is portrayed as an idiot? Again, attacking a very nature, not allowing us to recognize who we are, male and female, in his image. In his papal letter to women, John Paul II said, "Women's dignity has often been unacknowledged and their prerogatives misrepresented. They've often been relegated to the margins of society and even reduced to servitude. This has prevented women from truly being themselves and has resulted in a spiritual impoverishment of humanity." But, however, he says, and this is the thing that is so ironic, and this is what really woke me up when I started to study Scripture, and I started to see the way Jesus related and still relates to women. And I never had a problem with the male priesthood. I guess it was because I got Eucharist when I was in Catholic school. For whatever reason, I had that gift, and it just made sense to me that Christ came to us as a man, so it wouldn't be natural that only men could be priests. But what I didn't know was the kind of groundbreaking treatment and relationships that the Lord had with women, which nobody did back then. And this is what John Paul addresses so beautifully. When it comes to setting women free from every kind of exploitation and domination, the gospel contains an ever-relevant message which goes back to the attitude of Christ himself, transcending the established norms of his own culture. He was the first and the greatest woman's liver that ever walked the earth, guys, let me tell you. treated women with openness, respect, acceptance, and tenderness. In this way, honoring the dignity which women have always possessed according to God's plan and his love. John Paul II also said in this, and here is the apology part, certainly it's no easy task to assign the blame for this, considering the many kinds of cultural conditioning which down the centuries have shaped the ways of thinking and acting. And if objective blame, especially in particular historical context, has belonged to not just a few members of the church, John Paul II, in this writing, apologizes to women of the world. How many times have you seen this on the news when the church is accused of being sexist and oppressive? Here is the Pope apologizing to women of the world, and this letter, the papal letter to women, was released at the time of the Beijing Women's Conference in China, and that's one of the reasons why he wrote it. He says, "For this I am truly sorry." Talk about humility. Again, that surrendering. The leader of the Roman Catholic Church apologizing to women around the world. Now, the bottom line is many of the ills we have in our society today that directly impact you guys as fathers, husbands, brothers, co-workers of women have to do with not only how some men reacted, but also how feminists, radical feminists, reacted. And for this, I am truly sorry. I ask your apology on behalf of what I did when I was away from the church to promote this negative message about men and to promote radical feminism. A lot of women are speaking out about this, though. It's very interesting, and they come from some of the oddest places, and they don't even know that they're supporting church teaching. I don't know if you remember last fall when there was that big controversy with Sinead O'Connor and Miley Cyrus, when Sinead O'Connor put an open letter to Miley Cyrus on her website because of Miley Cyrus getting increasingly sexual in her videos and saying, look, you're just prostituting yourself. And you're only going to end up hurt and broken and used and tossed aside in the end. Even if you have $1 gazillion, you're going to be miserable. And then Charlotte Church chimed in, the British singer. And this is in October of last year. 27-year-old speaking out about her own experiences being handled by industry heavyweights, saying she felt unable to control the way her sexuality was either played down and hyped up over the years. The culture of demeaning women in pop music is so ingrained that it's become routine. She called for the industry to put an age-rated system in place for music videos similar to movies and video games. This is a secular star talking about the objectification of women. And for me, one of the most powerful statements came from a former member of the Obama administration, Anne-Marie Slaughter, who wrote a groundbreaking piece in The Atlantic in 2012. Drove radical feminists nuts. This woman took such a hit. I really give her a lot of credit. I'm probably in huge disagreement politically with her on many issues, but she had the guts to speak up for the truth about what the world does to women. And this was me. All of my life, I've been on the other side of this exchange. I'd been the woman smiling the faintly superior smile, while another woman told me she had decided to take some time out or pursue a less competitive career track so she could take time with her family. Now, this is what Anne-Marie Slaughter did. She was an official in the State Department, living full-time in Washington, only going home on the weekends to the East Coast, and she missed her kids and her husband terribly. And she knew that her kids weren't getting everything they needed because the two parents, the mother and the father, weren't there, and she's admitting this in this article. Okay? I've been the woman congratulating herself on the unswerving commitment to the feminist cause, chatting smugly with her dwindling number of college or law school friends who had reached and maintained their place on the highest rungs of their profession. I'd been the one telling young women at my lectures that you can have it all and do it all, regardless of what field you're in, which means I had been a part of making millions of women feel that they are to blame if they cannot manage to rise up the ladder as fast as men and also have a family and an active home life and be thin and beautiful to boot. That was me, and I had all these cute little young interns coming in and saying, oh, Mrs. Tomeo, we want to be just like you, and you have a great-looking husband, and you have a great job, and I'm thinking to myself, little sister, you have no idea what I sacrificed and what I'm losing, and this is in the midst before Dominic and I had healed our marriage, for the business that I thought was the ultimate thing in life. And here I am, like Marie Slaughter, living this life, and on the inside, it was killing me. So what do we do? Well, here is our plan, our action plan for building a legacy, for getting back to basics, for helping the women in your lives, in all of our lives, be whom they were called to be. What do? Well, you surrender, first of all. Every single one of us needs to surrender to Him, and it's not a one-time prayer. Every day we get up and we do it over and over again because we fall. St. Paul says, right? All have fallen short, all sin. So we need to do this continually. That's why it's so beautiful to have the sacrament of reconciliation. But surrender. I'm going to talk about God's will versus our will, but that's the theme of today, the surrender. It's got such a bad rap in the culture. And yet that's where the freedom comes in. Getting back to the basics of recognizing if God created us in His image and likeness, and He must know how this thing works better than we do. And when we keep trying to figure it out ourselves, and I'm speaking from experience, that's where the trouble comes in. Okay, so surrender and resurrender your life to Christ. Recognize the pain and confusion among women today. I've just given you a snapshot of some of the issues that women are facing, and I have women and men writing to me all the time with the struggles in their marriages, in their homes, with their kids, what they're feeling, what this society has done to us, all of us, because we've gotten away from who we are and how we're designed. So understand that a lot of maybe some of the pushback, some of the anger, some of the relationship issues are coming from a place of pain. I've learned a lot about that, not only from my own experience, but dealing with a lot of post-abortive men and women, and also women and men who've contracepted and who've also gone through healing for that, as Dominic and I did. They're coming from a place of pain. So recognize that. Speak up. Speak up for Jesus. Speak up for your daughters. Speak up for your sisters. Speak up for your wives. Your leadership is needed. When my husband and I were on the verge of divorce, he said, even if, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, even if you leave me, I will not let you leave God. And he prayed, and one night got down on his knees when I left. We were separated twice, short periods of time. Got down on his knees beside his bed and surrendered to God and put me in God's hands and said, Lord, your will be done, but don't let my wife be lost. He surrendered. We all need to do that. Speak up for Jesus, for faith, and for women. Lead by example. How did I eventually come back? My husband's witness. At first, he was a little bit overzealous, I will say, kind of like hitting me over the head with a catechism and a Bible all at once. But then he changed. His personality changed. I saw a much more, he was always loving and giving, but there was a different depth to him, and I wanted what he had. And that's what gradually brought me around and eventually allowed me to do what I'm doing today. This is so important, especially if you have kids, but also for the single guys who are on your own. You have to establish media guidelines. You have to be accountable. This stuff is serious, and we're going to get into that a little bit more this afternoon. I gave you the glimpse of that little girl from high school, what she was struggling with because of the culture. I gave you some of the stats. We heard from Charlotte Church and Anne-Marie Slaughter. All of these different women from all walks of life, some of whom have no religious fight here, dog in this fight, all saying something is rotten in Denmark. Get control and maintain control of the media. And if your kids don't like you, you know what? You're doing your job. Right? They don't need an iPhone 5 or whatever it is now at 10 years old. Okay? If you're a married man, do some of the planning. It's great that you're here today, because you planned and you worked this out, and I think if your wives are listening, they should be very proud of you. But what I hear mostly from the wives is that they're always the one dragging their husbands to these religious events, right? Offer to take your wife to a marriage retreat, a marriage encounter weekend. Go on our marriage pilgrimage on the high seas that Dominic and I are doing in November. Wouldn't that be some brownie points for you guys? If you rolled up the little flyer and stuck it in their Easter basket, right? Have a servant's attitude. Do something your wife, daughter, mother, sister, coworker hates to do. There are studies that show that women think men are sexy when they do the dishes. Totally serious. I wrote an article about it a few years ago. Listen. Listen, I know we can talk your ear off, right? But do you really listen to your wives? Pray, not only for the women in your lives, but with the women in your lives. And last but not least, have an attitude of gratitude for this incredible gift of this Catholic Church. You know, Dr. Scott Hahn says that Catholics are sitting on Fort Knox and they don't even know it. We have so many gifts in the Catholic Church, and as John said, don't let this just be a mountaintop experience because you'll burn out. If you don't take what you learn here today and apply it every day in your life by visiting some of the vendors and talking to some of the guys here who are in ministry, maybe volunteering for Holy Family Radio, whatever, if you don't follow up, you're going to lose it and you can't give what you don't have. Last but not least, some final words for sons and daughters of the King, and this is from one of my favorite teachers, Benedict XVI. Love, love, love him. This is so important, getting back to this surrender, to understand that if God loves us enough to die on the cross for us, an excruciating death, don't you think that he's got the best plan for us, and if we put his life, our life in his hands, things are going to work out? I'm a perfect example of that. But Benedict XVI said, God and the Ten Commandments are not a big no to life, but a big yes to love and to life. Stand strong, be good husbands, be good fathers, be good brothers in Christ. Single men, stand strong in your chastity and your respect of women. But most importantly, surrender. Give it over to God. Thank you. God bless you.